And I'm live again. Third time in one fucking day, huh? It's actually been weird because there's been kind of three phases. The first was my leaving Navan basically for Dublin. The second was me flying around the city centre. And this is me heading home, and I can tell you the view on my windscreen is a lot fucking different than it was when I left. It's bright now, it's the middle of the day essentially, it's 7 o'clock. So, what did I want to say to you? Yes! In the last episode, I think I asked you to remind me of something, but I've since reminded myself, so no need. I wanted to talk to you about how I managed to do what I'm doing. This idea of talking at length, both on the solo episodes and the conversations that I'm having. I've been kind of wondering to myself what makes me slightly different to most people, because I think it's fair to say most people couldn't do this. Now, not that I'm trained to do it or that I've worked particularly hard at doing it. I've said this about something else recently as well. I find myself being completely unprepared but fully prepared because, look, what better way can I put it? I've been talking to myself for fucking 20 years, more. You could say I've been talking to myself for 34 years. So I've just incorporated the out loud bit a little bit more. I say a little bit more because I've been talking out loud to myself for a very, very long time. But what made me go down this rabbit hole that I'm going down is something that happened to me last night. I was at home. Herself was visiting her dad, who it's not looking like he's going to make it past the next couple of days. And I was at home with the newborn Kiva. She was asleep beside me in her little cot thing. And Fionn, the main man, he was asleep in his bed, so I kind of had the house to myself, and I was pottering around, tidying up and making a few notes and just getting my shit together, as I call it. And now brace yourself, because this is going to sound very, very weird and very, very strange and very cold-hearted and very psychopathic and all sorts of crazy. But it seemed to me for a second that Kiva had stopped breathing. Now, any new parent will know this feeling. This feeling of, are they breathing? Are they fucking alive? Oh my God, what the fuck? And I'm worse with Kiva than I was with Fionn. I don't know why. I've often found that the second time you do something can be kind of more nerve-wracking than the first, because I think you know a little bit more of kind of what you're in for. But the weird thing was, when I thought that she had stopped breathing, and again, for people who don't have kids, or maybe for people who have fucking 10 kids and just this has never happened to, it's relatively common for a parent of a newborn to literally wake the child. So the child will be fast asleep, minding its own business, dreaming away, and then you basically poke it or shake it to basically make it cry so that you know it's still fucking alive. Because paranoia can creep in, and when you're dealing with a newborn, better to be paranoid and to wake a sleeping child than for there to be a breathing issue or some sort of a restriction or whatever, because that's obviously everyone's worst nightmare is a child to fucking die on their watch. Like, Jesus Christ, is I won't even go there. But it just doesn't fucking bear thinking of. But anyway, I got this notion into my head that maybe she wasn't breathing, and the thought that immediately popped into my head, and this is what's going to kind of sound fucked up, the thought that popped into my head was, and I don't mind saying this because this was almost an unconscious thing, I didn't intend to say what I said in my head, But what I said in my head was, don't die on my watch. Not, oh my God, don't die, or oh my God, are you okay? No. The selfish, the pure selfishness of my inner being, for want of a better term, said the words, not out loud, but in my head, said the words, don't die on my watch, or something to that effect. I can't remember exactly word for word what the thought was, but it amounts to nothing more or less than, don't let this happen while I'm the one in charge or in control. Almost as if to say that it would in some way be okay if my poor fucking fiance was the person that was there when something terrible happened. Now, I instantly recoiled in horror at the thought, because it was made apparent to me immediately, instantaneously. As soon as that thought arose, I went, Jesus, Frano, fucking hell, man. And I tried not to beat myself up too much about it, because I don't stand by that thought. I obviously don't want to be there if anything that was to happen, but more to the point, I don't want there to ever be anything bad happen to my fucking newborn daughter. Jesus Christ. Like the epitome of innocence wrapped up in a little blanket. But why am I sharing this with you? Because that wasn't a particularly heated moment. I had spent the previous, half an hour or 45 minutes sitting down, browsing through different things on my phone, watching the odd YouTube clip on the TV, writing the odd note. I made myself a hot whiskey because I'm still kind of getting over a bit of a head cold, so why have just a head cold when you can have a head cold and a bit of a hangover? So I was as relaxed as you could be. I had a pretty productive day. I loaded the van up for my delivery that you just joined me with over the last 2 episodes. I had done that yesterday. I had bought material to build more stuff in my place of business to help with increased capacity, and I had a very productive day. And I find that I tend to relax a lot more in the evenings when I've had a productive day. I find that the nights when I end up spending half the night mindlessly flicking through YouTube videos or articles online about stuff I don't really care about, I tend to do that far more often when I haven't had a particularly productive day. And I think what I'm doing is I'm trying to find something online that will justify the day I've just had and will justify my going to bed, will allow me to go to bed and say, right, you've actually done something, even if it was just watched an hour or 2 of YouTube, and even if that wasn't remotely productive, or maybe if it had a negative effect. But if I've had a really productive day, I find I can go to bed that little bit earlier and get to sleep that little bit quicker, because I suppose at peace with myself to a degree. But getting back to that thought that I had and how relaxed I was when that thought came to mind, I wasn't stressed out in my head. I wasn't in the middle of a heated argument with somebody. And that, I think, is the point that I want to make. We think certain things, and we've all done it. You mightn't have said what I said about my newborn baby, but you've probably said something else that you immediately regretted and I suppose felt ashamed of for having thought it. And that could manifest itself in a whole load of different ways. You might get the thought of, oh, I'd love to smash your fucking head in to some woman who was rude to you in a shop. And that might make you go, Jesus, that's a bit harsh. I wouldn't actually do that. Or maybe it's, oh yeah, I definitely give her one, and she's, related to you, or so, I don't know. These thoughts enter our heads, I think, and depending on how mentally fit you are, you could really drive yourself into the ground with guilt from having said something that you don't think. But so long as it's in your head, it doesn't really matter because nobody else hears it. And I can get away with telling you what I said, as ashamed as I am of having not said it, but said it to myself, thought it said. I can get away with that because I voluntarily given that up, say. That didn't slip out. This recording was somewhat premeditated. I knew at least the topic I was going to talk about. Not the words that I was going to say, but what happened last night happened and I knew I was going to talk about it. So there's a premeditated element that takes away from the shock of me blurting it out almost unconsciously. And I've mentioned before about the difference between the filter that we have. So we have this filter that stops us from vocalizing our internal dialogue. We tend to think thoughts. And some people don't have that filter. And that can be kind of really refreshing. There are some people that, as the Irish expression goes, can't hold their piss, which basically means anything that comes into their head, it just comes out their mouth. And that can be quite refreshing, as well as quite annoying. And those people tend to be, I don't know, simple sounds derogatory. I do mean simple and simplistic, but I don't mean it in a derogatory sense. You can be quite simple and quite simplistic in a very, very deep and meaningful and powerful way. But there's something very simplistic, something very easygoing, something very, I don't know, caring or warm, I don't know if they're the right words, about people like that. People who just speak their mind. Refreshing, I think, is the term, which is a shame. It's a shame to think that people who speak their mind is somehow refreshing, because that alludes to the fact that not many people do, because something wouldn't be refreshing if you got it all the time. It's only refreshing because it's rare. But this idea of having this internal dialogue and there being a danger, in a sense, of not having that filter is what I think people are afraid of when they come on the podcast, or it's what stops them from coming on the podcast. They're afraid of what they're going to say, and a lot of people have said that, including people who've come on. And a shout out to Darren McCann, I think my last guest that I've uploaded. It's not my last guest. Joy Booth was my last guest, but she hasn't been uploaded yet. She'll go live Sunday night, ready for Monday morning, so. But in fairness to Darren, like, he was, I think fair to say, shitting it pretty much throughout the recording. And if not throughout the recording, absolutely at the start and absolutely in the run-up to it. But he kind of, sick bag at the ready, felt the fear and did it anyway. And fair play to him again. Fucking kudos for that. Takes real balls to be terrified of something and to do it anyway, and to put yourself out there. It takes balls. So fucking fair play again, brother, and fair play to anybody else who has come on or who will come on, because it is kind of daunting. I can do it though. And I can do it with relative ease. And that's what I'm labouring to get to. I think the reason that I can do this more naturally than most say is because I'm not ashamed of any of the views that I hold. I'm not secretly a racist. I'm not secretly bigoted. I'm quite publicly racist. I'm quite publicly bigoted. And I think there's utility in racism and bigotry. because it's in some way necessary. Now, I don't mean racism in so far as, you know, black people are all bastards. That kind of, you know, extreme racism, that's just fucking nonsensical. That's a sign of a lack of intelligence, I would say, or at the very least a lack of understanding, or a lack of education, or a lack of awareness at the very least. And that's extreme racism or extreme bigotry. You know, hating the Jews because, you know, fuck the Jews. That's nonsensical. That's rubbish, complete nonsense. But there's utility in being, you know, look, I am entering the world of definitions here, which can be, as far as I'm concerned, some of the most interesting and most boring territory that there is to cover. Racism, as far as I'm aware, is defined as judging somebody by their race, basically. Typically by the colour of their skin, or maybe their dress, you know, their attire. And to say that we don't do that, to say that we don't judge a book by its cover, is, to me at least, to be completely, totally and utterly disingenuous. Because we do. We need to, I would argue. Because when you're walking down a poorly lit laneway and some guy some shifty looking fucker with a black eye and something that you can't quite make out in his hand, you know, comes towards you, you're going to judge that book by its cover all day long and get the fuck out of there. And rightly you should. Because people who don't get mugged. And granted, that's not exactly racism or bigotry, but it's just an example of how we need to judge the book by its cover. And because I suppose this is a relatively touchy subject, I might revisit it, having put my thoughts on paper and have a beginning, middle and end of what it is that I'm trying to get across, because I don't want to needlessly piss anybody off, but I do want people to be aware that I am a little bit racist, and I would argue that everybody is, and to deny that isn't helpful, to say the least. But getting back into this idea that I'm not, what am I not? I'm not ashamed of the thoughts that I hold. I think that's why I can speak so freely, and why I'm not afraid of kind of tripping up over myself. Because when you speak freely, and when you don't keep secrets from yourself and from others, let's say if I was an actual racist, I couldn't talk about racism, and I couldn't talk about bigotry, and I couldn't talk about the utility of it, because all the while I'd be concentrating too much on not appearing racist, because I am racist, if that makes sense. And I'd be very interested to hear your thoughts on that, because one of the beauties of these internal dialogues of mine that I'm recording and kind of putting out there to the world is it's getting my own thoughts straight in my head, because I know what my thoughts are on the utility of racism and bigotry. I don't know if I'd throw in the utility of misogyny in there. I think misogyny is something that can be stamped out over time and should be stamped out over time. Whereas racism, and by racism I mean racism under the guise of judging the book by its cover. I don't mean it as a justification for hating, you know, populations of people for no other reason than that's what you were fucking raised to think or do. That's not what I'm talking about. That's fucking ridiculous. Jesus Christ, it's 2018. Educate yourself, for fuck's sake. That's just nonsense. But again, what I think allows me to speak so freely is that I'm comfortable in my own skin. And I'm not ashamed of any of the views that I hold. And I'm keen to have my views changed, ideally in real time. Very hard, if not impossible. Not impossible, but very hard to do in a solo episode, because I don't have that person hitting the ball back to me. But I would love to have my views changed kind of live on a recording, so people can listen in firsthand on somebody having their opinion changed. Because these days, you know, changing your opinion is almost a sign of weakness. It's almost a sign that somebody has one-upped you in a sense. Someone has, you know, gotten the better of you, proven you wrong, as if that was a bad thing. And I think that if more of us made the effort to have our views changed, then the better we'd all be. So yeah, this is fucking episode 3 today. Quick time check. 21 minutes. I've waffled enough, I think. That'll be 3 for one day. I might get in a 4th today. Who fucking knows? Jesus, will I do the 40 and 40? Interesting. Again, let me know what you think. I'm offthelead@gmail.com. Hit me up on Patreon, www.patreon.com/offthelead. And I'll chat to you very soon.